The Cincinnati Bengals struck early on Tuesday with the tight end, and then things went mostly quiet. Let's talk about it.
Do the gritty.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. Today we get into the Bengals signing Mike Gesicki. Finally, a couple of years later, since we first started talking about Gesicki and the potential fit with the Cincinnati Bengals, we'll talk about that fit and what that signing means for the Bengals. And we got some updates on Joe Mixon. In fact, before he was officially released by the Cincinnati Bengals, the Texans came in and offered a 7th-round pick. So there is a trade that we will discuss. And the DT market, the defensive tackle market, is drying up. We'll get to all of that today. If you're new to the show, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast. We have you covered here on Locked On Bengals for every Bengals free agency move going on this week. And primarily there's one of those to talk about today, James. And then we're going to talk about what's happening in the defensive tackle market as the Bengals seem to be waiting on DJ Reader. But let's start with the move they did make, which is agreeing to terms for 1 year with Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, I like it. My instant reaction was, yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. It's up to $3.25 million. It's a 1-year deal. And look, is he a perfect tight end? No, you weren't getting a perfect tight end in this free agent class, period. The top was Noah Fant, no doubt. And who knows, maybe they were interested. I haven't heard that they were. I'm sure they were open to the idea at the right money. But after that, and after Dalton Schultz and Hunter Henry agreed to contracts elsewhere before the negotiating period started, it's like, okay, it's time to run it back the way they run it back. And locking up Drew Sample to a 3-year deal makes sense. And signing Mike Gesicki, taking a flyer on him, given what he can be in the passing game in this offense that is going to be pass first always, I think it makes sense. And so I like this move. I think it's low risk, medium reward. I don't want to say high reward, but it's medium reward. And that's really all you're looking for with a 1-year deal with really any tight end left on the market.
It should be, I would describe it as like a medium upgrade over Tanner Hudson, is how I see both the role and the upside of signing Mike Gesicki. There's a reason that he's available for these relatively cheap deals, these 1-year deals. Didn't go great for him in New England. Wasn't a good offense in New England. He was kind of phased out of the offense in Miami in his last years in Miami. But you go back to early in his career, he had 2 really good years, back-to-back years, over 700 yards. Has never been, the yards after catch type tight end. And Jonnu Smith would have been that guy if they wanted a guy in that mold in this tight end group. Noah Fant could be in that conversation as well. But Jonnu Smith, I think, led tight ends for yards after catch per reception or something like that.
Well, they're going to get Brock Bowers, so wait.
And it doesn't impact, if they do want to draft Brock Bowers, it doesn't impact their decision calculus at 18 at all. But it does give them a guy that tested like he had elite physical traits at the NFL Combine a few years ago, the Penn State athleticism training program. Those Penn State guys always come out and blow up the Combine, but he doesn't quite have that athleticism on tape. He's still a plus athlete. He's a better athlete than Tanner Hudson. He's a more explosive tight end than they've had with Joe Burrow. And
that's fair. No, that's
pretty sure about that. And it's not very close. He was in the 4. Am I remembering right that he was in the 4.4s at the Combine? I'll try to look that up really quickly while I'm talking about this. No, he wasn't. He was a 4.54, which is still extremely fast for a tight end. But really, he is a tight end in name only. Really? He's lining up in line about 10-15% of the time. He's lining up in the slot a majority of the time. And with Tyler Boyd no longer on the team, those slot snaps open up and he gives you a matchup nightmare potentially with his good size, 6'5.5", long arms, 34+ inch arms. He's a matchup problem for teams that want to try to match the Bengals in 12 personnel with nickel. And if they want to try to put a safety or linebacker on him, he's going to be faster. He's going to be bigger than safeties. He's going to be faster than linebackers. So a potential mismatch problem for the Bengals. And they could use that, right? And gives you another big target besides T. Higgins. And that way, very opposite from the Irv Smith idea last year, a lot more size with with Gesicki, but not a guy that's going to give you anything as a blocker. There's post-hype sleeper potential as a receiver. There's threat to all levels of the field as a receiver. There's intermediate productivity in his history. Most of his touchdowns historically come in the intermediate part of the football field. But dreaming on 3 years ago, Mike Gesicki is potentially a upside that would be hard for him to hit. But I do like the fit of his ability to play outside his frame and his size with Joe Burrow's accuracy. That is something
No,
that's really easy to project.
no doubt. He's really, you look at some of the advanced numbers on tight window throws to him. I think Next Gen Stats put something out about that. He's really good at that. I think Burrow's going to like him. And I don't want to rule out, and I know you're not, but just to be clear, I don't want to rule out that he can get back to that level, because it was weird in Miami. They had the regime change with Brian Flores and everything that happened. And there was the weird quarterback situation, and then Mike McDaniel gets there, and it's just kind of weird. And then last year in New England, let's be honest here, Gesicki made a poor decision. Whatever led him to New England, and I think it was Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator, his former college coach at Penn State, it was a poor decision. And he goes to a bad offense that was just flat out bad. And so I don't know. I don't think he's a complete tight end, or as complete of a tight end as Hunter Henry. But do I think he has upside in the passing game? Do I think he could be the best pass catcher the Bengals have had at tight end in the Joe Burrow era? I think that's reasonable. He's still got to go do it. There are a lot of things that need to be answered as far as what that room looks like outside of Mike Gesicki and outside of Drew Sample. But I like it because there's upside to this. And last year at this time, it didn't seem like they were wanting to solve the tight end room. They said, we'll worry about it later. I'm glad that they prioritized it enough, even if it wasn't with big money, Jake, because it's basically $3 million per year on these guys. It's not a ton, but it's enough to get these guys here. So Jake and James on Locked On Bengals aren't talking about it a week from now, wondering who the hell their starting tight end is. They'll be okay now. We know that. And we don't have to discuss, oh, well, what about this guy or that guy? And they may still add a guy. They may bring back Tanner Hudson still. Would not shock me. But I also think that they're going to target one in the draft, and we'll see if they can get one in the draft.
I think it does tell you that last year they thought they were going to be able to draft one. They signed a guy to a cheaper contract last year because they thought they'd be able to draft one. This year, I don't think they're so sure. There's fewer instant impact tight ends in this draft class. I think they believe that it's Bowers and then probably nothing could be what this tells you based on the money they've allocated to Mike Gesicki, which is a little bit less than he got from New England. Don't get me wrong. He was $4.5 million last year with New England, but they're paying him significantly more than they paid Irv Smith last year, who, by the way, went to the Chiefs for near the league minimum.
What, $1 million more than Irv? Wasn't Irv 1.75?
Was it? I thought it was.
And so, yeah,
I thought
I'm
it was
pretty
even
sure
less than that. That's still like in that range of, I know it's like not much in absolutes, but in that range of money, it ends up being.
Because I assume Gesicki will be what, 2.5, 3, max of 3, and then there's some incentives in there, I would imagine.
Was it max 3 or max 3.25? I can't remember now.
The max was 3.25.
Oh, okay.
I just mean base before incentives.
Like I figured like around 2.75 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little more than Irv, but I think he's better than Irv.
Yeah.
Like right away. His gritty isn't. His gritty.
That's the biggest upside here is that
gritty?
We'll get him gritty lessons, and we won't have to see the abomination that we saw previously.
Jamar's going to get him right.
Yeah.
I love that back
and the originator, LaGritty, will get him right. Right?
Right.
They both commented on it. A little bit more that I want to talk about with how Mike Gesicki fits with the Bengals. Then we'll talk about Joe Mixon's turned out to be traded instead of released. He gets to keep all the money that was promised to him this year, lands in a probably better fit on offense. We don't have to dive into that too much. And we'll get to the defensive tackle market drying up as well, as since we started recording this episode, Raekwon Davis has signed a 2-year, $14 million deal or something. The backup defensive line market is booming. And that's
the Colts. Wow, with the Colts.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
So we'll get to that topic to finish up the show in a little bit, but we're going to come back to Mike Gesicki coming up next.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to do what's important to you. And first, you have to know what's important to you so you can make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And maybe that's as simple as following along as the defensive tackles get signed in free agency and you wonder what's going to happen with the Bengals. Well, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and can fit any schedule, whether you're traveling for work, whether you're literally waiting for any news so you can write about it or podcast about it. Well, BetterHelp is here for you. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and all you have to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire and you will get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
So my last note on the Gesicki fit before we move on and talk about some other topics is with Drew Sample and Gesicki on the team, you have two tight ends that do totally different things, right? You have one guy who's in there, he can block, he can line up in the backfield, he can be your split back, third down protector, and Drew Sample grew into that role and might have some of that role again. And he's taken on more of those H-back duties as his career has gone on. And Mike Gesicki, who is a big slot receiver, a big receiver, a mismatch receiver. He might line up in line attached to the formation with Drew Sample also on the field 100 times or so this year, assuming 600, 700 snaps on offense. You're not going to see a ton of that. So I think, going back to this doesn't preclude them from drafting Brock Bowers. They're still looking for a tight end at some point, whether that's Mitch Wilcox or whether that's a guy late day 2, early day 3 with that new third round compensatory pick in the draft this year, a guy that can do a little bit of both. I think they're still looking for that guy. And it wouldn't shock me to see another tight end come in who can kind of bridge that gap and be a little bit more versatile because they don't really have terribly versatile pieces between the two of them. I know they did use Drew Sample a little bit more as a receiver last year. That's still not going to be his calling card. That's not what they're paying him for. In Gesicki, obviously he would be earning a lot more money if he was an all-round tight end, but he is a mismatch problem. And they will use him to leverage that. It gives them a little bit more flexibility, more versatility when they put him on the field with Tee Higgins, assuming that he's with the Bengals and Jamar Chase in terms of where those guys align and creating matchup problems for both Gesicki and those other guys, the premier wide receivers on this team. But this isn't like a shift toward 12 personnel in the sense that we were talking about it before. This isn't the kind of tight end you do that with. This is a big, freaky tight end / wide receiver hybrid kind of player.
No doubt. He can be your Tanner Boyd is what he can be. Is help with both. Yeah. It's Tanner Boyd. And that's great because that takes pressure off of Charlie Jones. That still allows them to move Jamar to the slot. That gives them flexibility there. But you're right. It's not going to be Sample and who else would you put? And CJ Uzama lining up next to each other and trying to go block or whatever it is. And even though Uzama, I wouldn't necessarily use him either in that situation.
Uzama's last year in Cincinnati is more of the kind of player that if they were to bring in somebody like that, that's like this is their kind of direction pointing toward more true 12 personnel. We're going to threaten running the ball. But, they just signed Zach Moss. They want to throw the ball. And that's what Gesicki signals as well.
And run out of the gun and do all of those things. And so I like it. It's why we talked about him last year and mentioned it. It's because it fits, and it fits honestly much better now that, and we'll see about Tyler Boyd. He hasn't signed anywhere yet, but I expect him to sign elsewhere. Now that you're not giving one a slot receiver, essentially a slot only 70% of the snaps on offense. Charlie Jones can play in there. Andre Yosevich could play outside. Jamar could play. Plenty of options. So really good point by you, Tanner Boyd. That's
I like that.
That's what we're going to trademark that right there. But we should get to Joe Mixon in the trade, because let's be honest here. I don't think anyone expected a trade to happen.
No.
Here's what I think happened. Joe Mixon's agent finds out that Joe Mixon is getting released. And he's like, all right, hold on. Because if he gets released, you got to test the running back market, and you just don't know. Being a free agent running back on, with 1,400 carries is really tough to do. And it's really tough, even if you're proven like Joe Mixon. And so the Texans were sort of desperate. They whiffed on the guys they wanted to get. They were in on Saquon, and the running back market moved. And so I think that this just kind of fell into place where the Bengals look at it, they were like, okay, yeah, just give us a 7th rounder or we'll release him. And the Texans are like, no, don't release him. We have cap space, and we don't want to have to deal with insert whatever team that could go after him, because we've missed out on all these other guys. And I'm sure his agent was in on this too, to try to make sure that it happened. It was right place, right time. And the Bengals get a 7th round pick out of it. I think it works for Joe because he gets to keep that contract, like you mentioned, and it works for the Bengals because they get a pick.
I think it's a better offense for him. They're going to be under center a lot more in Houston, but we'll see what happens with Joe Mixon's career there. I'm sure many of you, many of us will be watching to see how he does in Houston. He gets to go to a contender, which is nice for him as well. I do think the Bengals were trying to trade him. And this kind of revealed itself at the last minute. Maybe they weren't calling the right teams or something like that, but there were some indications that the Bengals were trying to trade him before they tried to release him. Ended up making the move for Moss, so announced the release, or the news of the release got out, and then a trade came together at the last minute.
Sure. I'm sure they shopped. I think it was, like I said, perfect storm where Houston's like, okay, we got to pay $5.75 million, and $3 million of it's due Sunday. Let's do it. Let's get this guy in the building now. And so I get it.
Maybe they missed whatever their primary plan was at running back, and they were like, okay, yeah, we'll do Mixon.
I did some research. They did for sure. They were in on Saquon, like I said, like tried to get him. And I think he just wanted to go to Philly. That was certainly part of it.
And they were rumored to be in on Derrick Henry as well. Derrick Henry, of course, lands in Baltimore. I think that was destined. I mean, people have been talking about Derrick Henry to Baltimore for over a month.
Worst kept secret in the NFL.
Yeah.
Worst kept secret. Honestly, I would have been surprised if he ended up anywhere else.
That one in Atlanta 2 years in a row. Atlanta last year with Jesse Bates, this year with Kirk Cousins. Like, both of those were. Are they going to wait the minute, or are those going to be your 12:01 announcements on Monday?
Yeah.
I think that's all I got on the Mixon trade. We're still waiting for news on DJ Reader. Meanwhile, backup defensive tackles are flying off the market at prices that are, quite honestly, a little bit shocking in some cases. Things are a little bit higher than I think anyone, maybe the NFL knew this was coming, but certainly higher than anyone in the media expected. And the Bengals have been apparently waiting to figure out what's going to happen with DJ Reader. And while they do so, well, we'll talk about all the guys that have been signed while they're playing that waiting game coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So maybe it's a concert coming up. Maybe it's an NBA game and you're a Cincinnatian and you're going to Indianapolis, for example, or you're going out of town and you want to catch an NBA game and you make that decision quick. Maybe it's the tournament in college hoops coming up. Well, Game Time is going to have tickets for all of those, and they're not going to have any hidden fees. They have all-in prices, and you can buy tickets in just a couple of taps. So make sure you download the Game Time app, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase with promo code Locked On. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Mentioned earlier in the show that Raekwon Davis has signed a contract. Grover Stewart signed a contract yesterday. The top of the market, Christian Wilkins, was gone quickly. Leonard Williams returned to Seattle. Fletcher Cox retired. Daquan Jones back in Buffalo. Greg Gaines back in Tampa Bay. Maurice Hurst returns to the Browns, as does Shelby Harris. Javon Kinlaw goes to the Jets. So who's left? The Bengals were apparently trying to sign Malcolm Roach, who went to the Denver Broncos from the New Orleans Saints, a 26-year-old, seen as an ascending nose tackle reportedly. But while the Bengals wait for DJ Reader, and as of 6:15 p.m., as we're recording this episode now, and we'll give you the timestamp so you know DJ Reader is still out there, there are fewer and fewer options for them when you look at the backup defensive tackles. And Arizona, for example, is paying guys like Bilal Nichols like $7.5, $8, $9, $10 million a year. Some players are getting paid significantly more than I thought we would see.
Yeah. I think they're excuse me, they're waiting on DJ. Tierra Tart, knock on wood, still out there. Who else is still out there, Jake? Sheldon Rankins.
He is.
And so
Eric Armstead.
Can you get Eric Armstead for sure? Can you get two of those four? Reader or Tart, and then can you go Rankins or Armstead? And to me, it would be Rankins would be the guy that you would probably go with if you were able to sign Reader, but maybe it is Rankins and Tart. I don't know. What's really weird to me is the Lions keep spending. I don't think the Browns are in on Reader, even though there's some speculation there just because of all the defensive linemen they've added. So is it down to the Bengals and Lions? Is there a sneaky team? Houston, there was rumblings of that, but I'm not sure they're in on that now.
Tennessee was also rumored at one point. That was Justina yesterday reported that.
Yep. Yeah, so it's interesting. I know the Bengals are still in clearly, and they didn't want to go too far on Malcolm Roach probably because of that. But it's interesting because at some point Reader's going to have to make a call, and what's the holdup? Is this the injury now? Is he going to have to take visits, or is it as simple as trying to get that second year guaranteed with whatever team? I don't know. I don't know what it is. Trying to get a third year. That's what I thought it was yesterday.
Yeah.
But now it's today, and it's been 24 hours. And so what's the holdup, I wonder?
It could be medicals. They might be waiting to fly DJ out so they can get their doctors to look at him. These other teams that are interested. That's the thing that I would speculate about most readily.
And so if that's the case, I would expect to hear about flights within the next let's say 12 hours. It's 6:19 Eastern right now, Tuesday night.
Yeah, visits would be scheduled.
Yeah.
You would expect to hear about DJ Reader is going to go visit Detroit or whatever. If that's going to happen. If you don't hear that, your guess is as good as mine, right? Could be that the Bengals are just working through structure and those sorts of things. Who knows? There are some other guys still out there. It's not like this market is completely barren, but the age range for guys they like, Tierra Tart's the obvious one that we've talked about, going back to last week or 2 weeks ago, the 27.5-year-old that has always played well against the Bengals, who they put a waiver claim in on last year. But then you go to the back of the market. Mike Dana played a ton for the Chiefs last year. If they wanted to dip into a guy that played for the Chiefs, Tim Settle with the Buffalo Bills has had flashes of good play throughout his career. Definitely more of the nose tackle type. There are some other guys in that role, the Jonathan Hankins of the world, if they want to go into the guys in their 30s. But certainly a lot of activity in this market and a lot more money than I think you could have anticipated for some of these guys. And so that's where it gets to be a little bit concerning, because it's hard to imagine the Bengals going out there and overspending on a backup rotational type at defensive line, given their tendencies to spend at that position and to spend on guys that are rotational pieces, especially external guys. It's hard to see them doing that.
Agreed. You know who's out there that they would never do because he's like Zach Taylor's age? Literally.
Calais
You know who it
Campbell.
is? I'm so in.
Is he
I'm
actually
so in.
available right now?
Yeah,
He's in our list. I see that he's in our list, so he must be.
I'm so in. Like, I'm so in.
I actually have
And
no idea how he played last year.
good, according to PFF. 400
Okay.
pass rush snaps, 80 overall. I mean, 80 in run defense. I'm not saying he needs to be 1,000
do
snap guy.
it.
I
Sure.
would be in. I'd be in on that. So that's kind of the question now is as this gets whittled down is how much are they willing to bend? Are they willing to bend? You go after Geno Stone and Zach Moss, and to me, it's laser vision. We are going to get our targets. Well, now one of your targets is DJ Reader, but you may have to bend a little bit. Kind of like they bent at tight end last year, as weird as it sounds. Like you might have to bend a little bit, not necessarily talent-wise, but with age. And Calais Campbell for 1 year, all in. Give me.
Yeah, why not? It's a great pivot option if they need to. He can provide value in both phases of what you're looking for defensive linemen to do. You know who he is. You know who he's been and who he's continued to be. And if they're going to break the mold and give Sheldon Rankins, for example, multiple years at 30 years old, which is why I've downplayed Sheldon Rankins the whole time. The idea of a multi-year deal for Rankins from the Bengals is just hard to imagine given their tendencies. Why not go for a very accomplished player in Calais Campbell, a guy that we would have liked for them to have signed the last couple of years?
They did it with Gesicki, baby. Gritty with Gesicki.
Is Gesicki a mold breaker, though? Is that what you're saying?
No. I just mean like a guy we mentioned for a couple of years, and then they finally. Yeah. Rankins would be that too, by the way. We've talked about him multiple times on this podcast in the past.
Yeah. The other markets that haven't really developed too much, just to touch on that and close the loop on Bengals positions of need, would be corner hasn't really moved. We talked about corner. We talked about Kendall Fuller a little bit. Kendall Fuller was a hot topic yesterday. We talked about the back of the corner market. There's been a little bit of movement there, not a ton. And then the offensive tackle market has seen Jermaine Illuminor sign. And maybe Mike Nwenu is going to play some tackle for New England, but that's about it. This tackle market has been very slow, and perhaps this is a reaction to the very strong tackle class. And if you see the Bengals go spend minimal money there, that tells you what they're doing in the first round. And I think that's the direction they would like to go as of today anyway. But they do need a right tackle, and that market has been very, very slow to start moving, at least so far.
It has. And so is that Becton? Bending with Becton, right? Gritty with Gesicki, Bending with Becton. We have Tanner Boyd. I'm going to try to come up with all of them here. Geno Stone. Oh, there's plenty of ways to do that with him. Zach Moss will be easy as well. So time to do it. But yeah, tackle. It's literally all eyes on tackle to me. Corner can wait almost. Don't be late. But you got to get these tackles, defensive tackle and right tackle. All eyes are on it. And I think that veterans on the team as well are eyeing this, just wondering what's going to happen at both spots, including Jonah, just hanging out there right now.
Yeah. Still think that it's unlikely that Jonah returns, but
not implying he would, but he's just hanging out.
The scenario that we've discussed over the last 24 hours or so, or that I've discussed for Jonah's potential return, is that a market doesn't materialize. They don't end up spending the money on DJ Reader. They have to spend less at defensive tackle than they were planning to. They have extra money that they weren't expecting to have. And, Jonah's still out there. Would he take $10 million? That's the way you would see something like that coming together. I think that's a lot of ifs. And I wouldn't call that something approaching likely, but never say never at this time of year. We've learned that lesson. We learned that lesson a little bit with Jermaine Pratt last year.
Yep, I agree with you. I think Mekhi Becton is still the one. We will see, my friend, and guess what? I think you're going to see me again tonight. I don't think this is it. Maybe I'm dead wrong. I think you're going to have to deal with me again tonight.
What we should be doing is we should be tracking the time that the Bengals moves are coming out year over year, because there's been some consistencies, and they're also doing it to annoy me as much as possible. So when I start to relax and take my contact lenses out again, start to
Jake has a
occupy
date
myself
tonight
with another activity,
He's got a date tonight. Oh, yeah, he does.
There will be news.
Mhm.
It happened to me twice yesterday,
Oh,
just
hey,
like last year.
Stop going on so many dates, my man.
It wasn't this year wasn't dates, but it was still
It's not
minor
a play. He
inconvenience.
just crush a lot. What?
That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Mercifully, we are done with this episode after that comment, James Rapine. Until next time, when the Bengals make their move at whatever time they make their move tonight or tomorrow, we'll be back with you. Thanks for listening. Hooday, and have a good one.